I'm going to be speaking to Margaret Kimberly. She's an editor and senior columnist for Black Agenda Report. Presently, she's in New York City, and we're going to be talking about the killing of Trayvon Martin and the freeing of George Zimmerman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Margaret, you were one of the first people to warn that George Zimmerman might get off. You wrote an article a few days before the verdict, If George Zimmerman Goes Free.
Yes, I did. I did not follow the trial on a daily basis, but I had a fear that from what I observed and from the reactions of people to it, that while I believe millions of other people felt it was an open and shut case of murder, that Zimmerman acting as a white man, I know he's half Latino, but he clearly sees himself as a white person in the state of Florida with its stand your ground laws, with its history of segregation as a former Confederate state, and those states never lose that history. I thought that the jurors might identify with him completely and fully and not see the facts. I was reminded of the Rodney King case, where Rodney King's beating was on videotape. Oscar Grant's killing was on videotape. But it doesn't seem to matter where black people are concerned. And I recalled there's a group called the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, and last year they wrote a study about the extrajudicial killing of black people across this country, and they concluded that at a minimum every 28 hours a black person is killed in the way Trayvon Martin was killed, by a cop, by a vigilante, or by a security guard. And in the vast majority of those cases there's no arrest. If there is any charge, there's almost always an acquittal. And that is because, as my colleague Glenn Ford pointed out, lynch law was never repealed. The law in this country exists to support white people. And that means when black people need justice vis-a-vis a white person, we're pretty much out of luck. So
you talked, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
You had talked about what ought to be the response to your title, If George Zimmerman Goes Free. And you anticipated, of course, that people would be angry, they'd jump out in the streets, but what had to be done. And you have a line, there must be a very public, very outspoken acknowledgement that our system demands that black people be victimized by those in authority on a regular basis. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, I think, if people are, there's been so much said in the past week since the verdict came down. Pundits and articles and the president and other elected officials, and very few of those people are willing to say the hard truth that I stated in that sentence. America is still ruled by white supremacy. And if you talk about this case and don't make that point, it really is frankly useless to go on and on about why black people are angry, why we see this case differently, why we fear for our children. Those things are all true and they can be said, but if you don't talk about the fact that the system supports white people against black people, then it's all for naught.
Where were you when the verdict came in? Were you watching it?
No, I was not. I made a point of not watching it. I knew Friday the jurors had begun their deliberation, and Saturday I'd get these reports. They went to lunch. They asked the judge a question, and I realized it was, frankly, too much stress for me to pay attention. So I decided not to, and watched a movie or something. And I got a text from one of my sisters about the verdict. And while I was not surprised, obviously, having written those words a few days before, I still had hopes. I hoped that somehow I was wrong, that some logic would prevail. But, of course, it was not to be. I was right the first time. And it was very difficult to take it all in, even though it was something I had predicted.
Now, the president, either the next day or the day after, made a very brief comment, calling for calm, and the jury has made its verdict. And then you wrote a You wrote a piece. I don't have the exact title, but in it was something about the dog whistle.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that piece?
Yeah, well, dog whistling is a term, as the dog whistle is something only dogs can hear. Now I'm told that it's actually not true. But at any rate, there's supposed to be this pitch that only dogs can hear. And so politicians engage in this subterfuge where they appear to talk to one group of people and they're actually speaking to another constituency altogether. Obama's comments about the initial White House statement about the verdict was a statement meant for white people. Obama did what he has done quite often, which is talk over the heads of black people to white people. That first statement was for white people. It was letting white people know, I am not siding with black America. I'm not angry. I'm telling them not to be angry. And essentially almost justifying the verdict and justifying the fact that we are not, as a people, ever supposed to speak out. We're allowed to speak out against jury verdicts. There's nothing that says, while the jury verdict stands under the law, we're entitled to have opinions and feelings about them. And who is he to say who should be calm and who shouldn't be calm? But the statement wasn't for black people. The statement was for white people. As the week went on, it was clear to him he had to do better than that in his appeal to white people. So Friday afternoon, he makes this statement in the White House press room, which was once again meant for white people, but the attachment of black people to him is so strong, and it saddens me to say that black people related to his, all he has to do is say, when Trayvon Martin was first killed, his initial reaction was, well, we can't get involved in every local law enforcement issue. That's what he said first.
Right.
Then he said, he could have been my son, or he looked like me, or I looked like him, or whatever the hell. That was to calm black people down. He does, as Glenn always says, tries to reconcile the irreconcilable. So at any rate, on Friday, he makes this further statement, he could have been me, I could have been him, he looks like me, I looks like him. Enough. He's the President of the United States. All I want to know is the federal government going to prosecute George Zimmerman or not? And I think from that statement, we can conclude that there will not be a prosecution. There was a case of a man named Sean Bell here in New York City who was killed.
Sure.
Shot by the police the night before he was to be married. He and his friends had taken him out to a strip club. The cops were surveilling a strip club for some reason. At any rate, they shot him and his friends, 40 shots into their car. This poor man was killed, and the Obama Justice Department concluded there was no need for a federal civil rights prosecution. So I wrote on Twitter that, Obama said blah, blah, and blah. We need to know this sentimentality is not enough. It's not enough for me. Unfortunately, it is enough for most other people, and that's very sad. That Trayvon looked like him, or could have been him, or he could have been Trayvon, or Trayvon could look like his child if he had a son, and enough already. Are you going to...
I thought it was... it was sort of totally without passion, without anger. I mean, he could have been discussing building a new highway or something.
I think your observation is correct. He doesn't care. He knew that he had to say something, and so that's as much as he can muster, is evoke a little sentimentality to make black people happy, and to really, if you read between the lines, make white people know, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything for black people. So so that's what it amounts to, and it's terrible because he gets away with things that a white president would not. Once again, it proves to me black people are worse off for having a black president.
Are things going to change now? I don't know. Maybe I'm just being hopeful, but among some people, just going to some of the rallies up here in the New Haven area, there seemed to be some anger. Saying we've been going through 5 years of a supposed post-racial society, and this thing could happen, and there's not going to be any punishment. Maybe some eyes are being opened?
I think some are. You know, even though Trayvon Martin was joined by 300 other black people killed in the same year under similar circumstances, he was the one. We knew his name. We've seen his family. We know the details of how he was killed. And so it raises everybody's consciousness and knowledge that this is something that black people are at risk of having happen to them at any time. So that does raise the level of feeling. It does raise a few more voices against Obama, but I don't think it will raise enough. The people I thought, once again, people who I respected and thought were smarter were actually impressed with Obama's very bland, unemotional statement. And you're right, he's unemotional because he doesn't have any connection with black people at all. And he says these words. He knows what to say to touch black people's emotions, but it comes without any true concern, without any true feeling.
One thing that the president made, talking about basically black-on-black crime, and in some of the rallies in New Haven, I was just sort of amazed, people bringing this thing up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, here, Trayvon Martin is killed, this racist murder, and some of the speeches weren't about that. They were saying, you know, we got to stay in school, we've got to stop the violence. You know, I was just
it's so offensive because Trayvon Martin was in school. He had no criminal record. He was not involved in anything illegal. So I have no idea why people are bringing that up in this case. As for black-on-black crime, the term is meant to shut black people up, to say that you are not worthy, you are not deserving, you should be punished. And by the way, people commit crimes generally in their own community, within their own group. Something like, I saw a statistic the other day, something like 85% of white people are murdered by other white people. So there's white-on-white crime for the most part. So it's very disingenuous to raise this issue of black-on-black crime when you're talking about something which has historically been allowed and perpetrated with the help of the law, and that is white-on-black crime, which has always been legal. Lynch law was never repealed, from slavery to Jim Crow to lynching to now mass incarceration. The law has been on the side of white people where the punishment of black people is concerned.
I wanted to close to talk about Black Agenda Report because it just has such wonderful articles. I just saw Glenn Ford's piece where he talked about racism as a mental disease, seeing things that are not really there. Could you tell us about that site, how it came about, who writes for it?
Sure. We were founded, myself, Glenn Ford, and Bruce Dixon. We had been on another website, Black Commentator, and decided to do our own thing, so to speak. In 2006, Black Agenda Report came into being. Our basic assertion is that there is a black agenda. Black people should have a political agenda. We do have a unique situation in this country, and as black people, we should not shrink from asserting that fact and from making demands. Black Agenda Report does, if I may say so myself, a good job of covering news that is not covered by the corporate media. We talk about domestic issues and world issues through a focus of black people's interests. And we always assert that black people must make demands. The system does nothing for us. Everybody loves to quote Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing about it without a demand, never has and never will. Unfortunately, with the ascension of Barack Obama, black people have forgotten that. And we are, unfortunately, in this case, the Trayvon Martin case proves his being in the White House does nothing for black people. All we've gotten out of him being president is people being happy and proud to see him in the job. So here we have people actually writing petitions for a federal investigation of Trayvon Martin's murder. Black people should have absolute confidence, should be absolutely sure that there will be a federal prosecution of George Zimmerman. There should be no need for a protest, no need for these petitions. We should know for a fact that this is going to happen. And and that shows the hollowness of the Obama administration and how it affects black people's lives.
I want to thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.
I've been speaking to Margaret Kimberly. I'm Stanley Heller. Thanks for listening.